Hello, everybody. As you can see, I've got a guest here sitting next to me. A lot of people said it never happened, and I want to remind everyone. I expect a lot of comments and whatnot, and I would hope that you would treat Jay with the same respect you would treat me. And we're going to get into it. Jay, thank you for coming here. I appreciate it.
The trolls are going to attack us.
Well, that's
They're going to
okay.
attack you, and they're going to attack me.
The trolls I can handle. I guess I want to start off by saying thank you. And as we were saying off camera, we're not going to agree on everything, but I think we both have our own values, and so let's get into it.
Trolls want us to hate each other. That's what they want.
Look, there's a lot of police officers I've known over the years, and I don't even know if I hated any of them, even the ones that I didn't think were honorable or appropriate. Just kind of like, brushed them off like, I'm not going to give these guys any time. And, so this opens up like my first question I have in my mind. And I don't know if a lot of the people out there realize this. You came on the ATF. I'm going to get into this and I'm going to backtrack. You got shot.
I did.
It was just a couple of days after you.
I got hired on a Monday. I got a badge and a gun, and I took my oath. 4 days later, I was taken hostage. I got shot point blank in the back by the suspect. The bullet went in my back. It went through my lung. It narrowly missed my heart. It exited my chest. And 4 days on the job, I had blood coming out of my chest like you're holding your thumb over the end of a garden hose. With ATF, we get paid every 2 weeks. I hadn't gotten a paycheck yet, and I was bleeding to death.
So you got shot, and you haven't even received a check yet.
No.
Well, and
I comped him that one. It was on the house.
that was on the house. And I want to ask you something that came to my mind. Why didn't you sue?
There was liability attorneys begging me to give them my case. And waiting in line at the hospital outside my room saying, how many zeros do you want on that check? You were not trained. You were not prepared. The government has assumed a huge liability by allowing you to be in this situation. I can get you generational money. And my only answer was get out. Like I didn't take this job ever expecting a paycheck out of it.
Well, I had a similar situation in Santa Barbara. I got in a wreck up there in 2005, and it took me to the hospital. It was a pretty good wreck. They took me to the hospital, and the intelligence unit from Santa Barbara sheriffs and the Santa Barbara PD showed up, and they basically checked me out of the hospital. They didn't want me there. It was a holiday weekend. No, they felt that if I would have been admitted in the hospital, I would have had to have a guard on the door. They thought it was a hit, is what happened. And I didn't sue either, because the guys from Santa Barbara were just starting out to make a charter there. And I thought, not a good way to build a relationship, because I was in it for the spirit, not for the dough, and I found that interesting. And, how I found out some of this information was, and you may know it, you may not know it. You did a show on National Public Radio. I can't remember the name of the series. It wasn't like a 90-minute. Do you know they hired me to vet everything you said?
Yeah, I would expect them to. I think they should.
Yeah, they did. Everything you said, and that had to do with the Hells Angels and beyond, they had me investigate you in a sense. And I vetted everything you said, and everything you said was true.
You should be doing that. Yeah. If I say something that is wrong or inappropriate, you should correct it.
And we'll get into that, because you and I, we have some obvious differences, and we'll talk about that as things progress. But
I think we met.
We did.
And I'm not sure you recall this. The funeral for Bobby Perez,
right.
Bobby Angel in San Diego.
Right.
I was prospecting, and at the King's table at the Dago Clubhouse.
Right.
Sonny Barger, Chuck Zito,
right.
Guy Castiglione,
sure.
The Arizona Power players were there, and I kept my distance, because that was like That was the king's table.
Right.
And I was a prospect, and I was like,
Now, did I meet you in Ventura once as well?
I believe so.
I did. I felt I met you, was near the ink house across the street. I was over at Starbucks getting a coffee, and you had drifted in with somebody, and we had a brief, hey, how you doing? And, you know, I don't know how law enforcement perceived me. I was very suspicious of everyone. If I couldn't, after the Tony Tate fiasco, I was like, I didn't trust anybody.
There is a reason why, like people in that community are paranoid and suspicious. It keeps you out of jail. It keeps you out of prison. You can't automatically trust people,
Right.
because you end up getting, building friendships that are false, building loyalty that's false. Ultimately, from an undercover perspective, that trust and friendship, sometimes love, is betrayed.
Right. Now, how does that? I know how it made me feel. How does it make you feel when you are undercover and you're meeting these guys? Do you feel you betraying them?
100%. 100%.
And how do you come to terms with that?
There were people I met that I developed affection for,
Right.
that I liked, that I cared for, that I found no satisfaction in their arrest or what happened. It was never personal for me. I never set out to make sure that anybody went to prison. My job was to gather intelligence, gather information, gather evidence, and then report that to a handler, to a case agent, who then took it to a prosecutor, who took it to a judge or a jury. My job was to never ensure anybody went to prison.
Did you ever take it upon yourself to say, I want this son of a bitch behind bars? Did you take that kind of approach? I've talked to some law enforcement officers that were high up in the echelon, very experienced, and they said the biggest mistake police officers make, whether undercover, on the street, wherever they're at, is when they make it personal. Do you agree?
I do, and I think that if I target George, like now I start like looking or inventing ways to get you, instead of gathering intelligence and gathering that information and building a legitimate case. The motivation is backwards when it becomes personal.
Do you let them walk into it, or do you feel you pull them into it? Because there's a difference, you know. Some people walk into things, other people are pulled into things. It's like Tony Tate continually tried to pull me in. There's 4 recorded conversations that I know of where he intentionally tried to pull me in, and I didn't want to go, but he kept coming back. So how do you deal with that?
From the most common defense is entrapment, that the person that is on trial was entrapped.
Right.
So to defeat entrapment, there has to be predisposition there. If you're predisposed to commit a murder, sell drugs, sell guns, do robberies, whatever it is, you have to justify that predisposition. Now, can I give you an opportunity to commit a crime that you're predisposed to commit? Now it's your choice whether you engage that. But I can't entice you, or I can't make the pot so sweet that someone can't say no to it.
How do you guys deal with rogue agents? Were you ever considered a rogue agent by any of your superiors? Or
Well, I'll say I don't know that I was considered rogue. I'll tell you this: I would not have wanted to be my boss.
Right.
I would not have wanted to manage me, because like I was hyper aggressive, and I was reckless at times.
Narcotics use?
And unsafe at times. No, I was never a big drinker.
Okay.
I wasn't a drug guy, but I took extreme risks. That probably the thing. I was never the best undercover agent. I've said that publicly and privately in my entire career.
Why do you classify yourself or put yourself in that classification? Because I mean, you probably came closer than anybody ever has to infiltrating the Hells Angels, and we'll talk about that later.
There's dozens of undercover operatives who I consider to be better than I was.
Who's the best? out there?
Well, if there was a Mount Rushmore of undercover agents, the first face carved in the granite would be Joe Pistone, would be Donnie Brasco. He's the godfather of the trade craft, of long-term deep cover infiltrations. But there's dozens of those guys. Jackie Garcia with the FBI, Bob Delaney, Billy Queen, who infiltrated the Mongols.
Sure.
There's, those guys are everywhere out there. Don Polifrom, an ATF agent who got next to Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman.
Sure.
And worked that case. Dick Stoltz, an undercover ATF agent. This guy wore polo shirts and Sensible slacks his whole career and sold 500 shoulder-launched rockets to the Chinese military. Those are top flight, best of the best ever undercovers.
I met Joe Pistone once, and it was funny because he's kind of a humorous guy. He's got a good disposition about him. And he said to me, George Christie. And I recognized him, Joe Pistone. I said, I don't know if it's a good thing you recognize me or a bad thing. But we shook hands and we spoke briefly. But he's an interesting guy.
Oh, yes, he's a gentleman. And in that undercover world, there is an unspoken, unofficial fraternity of people who've done like long-term deep cover infiltrations. Right. There's not a whole lot of them.
That's right.
But the ones that have done it, that there's a mutual respect there.
Let me go back a little bit. Now, you had an aspiring football career, and didn't you play with some people that became NFL giants?
Yeah, I had a very nice college football career.
Right.
And at that time, as a college athlete, I played against John Elway. I played against Marcus Allen, Eric Dickerson, Mike Singletary.
I know.
Guys who became the best of the best.
I know that, and that was part of the vetting process when I was checking you out for NPR. I found these things out, and I was like, whoa, were you too small? 'Cause how tall are you?
I'm
bigger.
6'1".
6'1", yeah. I thought you were 6'2" when.
Well, I'll tell you,
it's the boots.
The way I landed in law enforcement is because I was a failed athlete. I thought I was all that. I went to the NFL Combine, the NFL's meat market, to be tested. And so I crossed paths with Al Davis, who was the owner of the Oakland Raiders.
Sure, yeah.
And so I said, Coach Davis, how am I doing? And he finds me on the score sheet, and he's like, Dobbyns, there you are. You're the fastest slow guy I've seen today.
And what the hell does that mean?
And I was like, okay. So I crossed paths with a couple guys that I'm working out with, going through the drills with. One guy's from a little school in Pennsylvania, another guy's from a little school in Mississippi. Never heard of these dudes. 10 minutes into the drills, I realized I wasn't going to be a professional football player because I couldn't do what they could do. They were bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, quicker, could jump higher. The guy from the little school in Pennsylvania was Andre Reed, who played 15 years in the league and played in 4 Super Bowls and is in the Hall of Fame. The guy from the little school in Mississippi was Jerry Rice, arguably the best football player to ever put on a helmet or shoulder pads. So I wasn't judging myself against the fairest competition, but nonetheless, I never had a plan B. I only had a plan A, and my plan A had just failed.
Well, when the Boz made that movie Stone Cold, him and I were hanging out. Mickey Rourke introduced me to him, and interesting guy, and he basically said a lot of those people, he was top of the line college ball, but it's a whole different level in the NFL.
If I had an excuse to not have made it, I would use it. I don't have one. I wasn't good enough.
Okay, that's fair, and I guess you did the Sons of Silence. People haven't talked about that, but
I made a guest appearance in that case. To 2 really amazing ATF agents had infiltrated the Sons in Colorado Springs.
Were they actually Sons members?
Yeah,
they were.
Lake Bowler and Darrell Edwards had become full-patched Sons members in Colorado Springs. To supplement their case, at the back end of the case, to help build the RICO, part of a RICO is that organization controls territory and controls adversaries. And so myself and a couple other of 4 other agents showed up in Colorado Springs with this completely fabricated, homemade biker gang called the Unforgiven,
Right.
wearing Colorado bottom rockers. And we basically were throwing ourselves out there as bait to see, are the Sons going to approach us? Are they going to intimidate us and tell us you can't be here without our permission?
And what was the goal to get them to do that so you could get some sort of intimidation charge, or what were you going? What was your goal?
It's
as
like
an
we
agent?
talked about earlier. They were predisposed for that, and we were giving them an opportunity to show that that is in fact how they conducted their business. We go into this bar, we scout the bar, there's nothing there. We go into a spot that they hung out at called Jeannie's Tavern in Colorado Springs. And we're smoking and joking and showing off and talking shit. Well, out of the back room, little did we know, they were having a charter church. And a dozen Sons come out of the back room when we're there kind of showing our ass.
This was serendipitous. This wasn't planned.
It was not planned. We would have avoided that audacious of an approach.
Right.
Get confronted, and they just basically said, you guys can't be here. You got to take those cuts off and leave them, or we don't ever see you again. Right there, it was mission accomplished. Like the objective of that operation was completed.
So what would that be? Would that fall under intimidation?
Intimidation, control of territory,
Control of territory.
Use of violence.
And that would those be RICO charges?
Those would have been part of a RICO.
No.
Predicate act for a RICO.
Are you familiar with VICOR?
Violent crime in aid of racketeering.
Yeah, that was something that Black Biscuit kind of got into.
And
didn't it?
like all those dovetail together with like CCE, a continuing criminal enterprise.
Right. So those things all bleed into each other.
They do. They overlap. So we get confronted, and I made the fatal flaw in when we were confronted and intimidated. Like all I had to do was take off this fake homemade cut and hand it over, and it would have made the case better. I didn't get out of roll, and I told the president of the Sons, I'm like, first of all, I never heard of you dudes. Okay, now all of a sudden they're pissed now.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to leave here after I finish this beer, or maybe 10 more beers. But I'm going to leave on my terms, not on yours. And it was on. And the Sons of Silence beat the dog shit out of us in that bar. They locked the doors.
That was my next question.
Everybody in that bar, the Sons members and all their support friends, pool cues, pool balls, D-cell flashlights, it was on, and they didn't let us leave until they were done beating on us.
And did they take the patches?
Well, that kind of the funny story is, like, I'm rolling around on the ground with a guy named Doug Luckett, who Doug Luckett is legitimately 6'9", 300 pounds, and one of my partners in the debrief.
Now, how many were you?
There was
Undercover
at that
guys?
point there was 5 of us. At that point there was 3 of us that got in the fight. And one of my partners afterwards was laughing. We're bleeding. We're like trying to like catch our breath. We're in the parking lot, and he's laughing his ass off. He said, "You were at that bottom of that pile saying, 'My shit's still on. I still got my cut on. You don't have it. You can't take it.'"
You were antagonizing them.
I was wrong. That was a failure on my part.
And what prompted you to take that posture? I mean, I'm sure the upper echelon guys, you probably got your ass chewed, or at least.
Part of the reason why going back when I said like I would not have wanted to be my boss or manage me was because of that recklessness. All I had to do was hand it over to make the case better. I made the case worse, actually, by getting in the fight.
Right.
I instigated the fight. I don't think they showed up wanting to kick our ass. They had to.
And how do you feel about that?
I don't feel good about it, and I'll tell you why. Not because of how it ended, is because of my reckless decisions. I put my partners in jeopardy. They would have let us leave. They would have let us walk away and then ride away.
Now, let me ask you another question then. How did your partners feel about you?
Man, like,
You like you just said, you put them in jeopardy. So, did they feel responsible to you, or were they mad at you?
I don't know that they were mad at me. They felt responsibility for me. They joined in the fight and fought their ass off as hard as they could. But the fact that I made a reckless decision, that's a humiliating statement to make about myself. Like I put these people that trusted me, and I'm in their hands, and I betrayed them.
And you know, like, are these things that you've been coming to terms with, or is this something you walked out of that bar and went, man, I fucked up?
All the above.
All of the above.
Yeah, I try to be transparent about myself. I've made a million mistakes in my life. I've done a million things wrong. God and my wife and my kids and my friends have given me 1,000,001 second chances to try to get it right.
Do you feel at times you ever feel you took the wrong path, that maybe you would have made a better outlaw than a undercover
Well, I'll
agent?
say this, I could have made better decisions. I don't regret my career, but now in hindsight, knowing where the mistakes were, I could have done it better. I could have done it cleaner. I could have been better. I could have left ATF with some admiration and some legacy. And like, man, ATF has airbrushed me out of the yearbook.
Yeah,
There is no
and
legacy.
for what reason? So you're out bad like me.
I'm out bad.
Oh my God.
I'm out bad with, and I think that for me, the way things shook out, this agency that I gave my life to, my professional life, my blood, sweat, and tears, and my loyalty, I loved ATF. ATF just didn't love me back.
And how much of it is Jay's fault, and how much is it that the agency kind of turned their back on you? I mean, certainly you contributed to it, but
Yeah.
but is this how they treat their people?
To answer that question honestly, there were some people that were in my chain of command that were corrupt and were from. I don't blame them. I'm not an excuse guy, and I'm not a blame guy. I blame myself for giving them the opportunity to do that to me.
Okay, well let's talk about. You know, there's a lot of things I could jump in, and I want you to talk. This is about Jay Dobbyns, and it's not about George Christie. You know, but I see a lot of similarities, and you've got a situation where you're devoting your life. Was there some jealousies up there with the upper echelon people?
100%.
Were they worried that this guy could be the first guy that infiltrated the Hells Angels? You know, and that seems to be always in question. Did he or didn't he? Did he or didn't he? You know, people ask me that all the time, and I say, oh, only Jay Dobbyns knows that answer, you know. But talk about the politics with your bosses and the jealousies, and because you know you get the same thing in the outlaw bike world, because basically we're all humans, and you know we operate the same way. It might be under different terms, under different you know social acceptances and whatnot, but we're humans, you know, and we're all kind of generated the same way. So you know, tell everybody what is going on in the upper echelon, the structure, the jealousies. Who'd you piss off?
Success breeds jealousy.
Okay.
And I'll say this. I thought for years and years that I had hundreds of friends. When things broke bad for me, it really turns out that I had hundreds of acquaintances. There was a lot of people that I thought were my friends who then lost my phone number and decided that they weren't going to be my friend until the dust settled.
Did you have anybody step up and say, hey, look, Jay, you fucked up, and, you know, I can't support you, or I can support you? And were these people in the law enforcement family, or were they people out of the law enforcement family?
Both. And like all the above. People that were like, I think this statement about myself probably you could apply to you. I've been told you're one of the most polarizing people that I have ever met. And the explanation was given, there's people out there that want to put a bullet in your head, and there's people that are dying to jump in front of that bullet for you. And there's very few people in between.
Right. I understand that. And, you know, I certainly had my issues with my old club. You know, personally, it was between Sonny Barger and I. You know, I don't know how law enforcement perceived things. You were kind of around when we had the 50th anniversary in Ventura, and a lot of people in law enforcement felt that that was some sort of coronation for George Christie to kind of, Sonny had gone to Arizona and was, living the good life on the ranch, and, George Christie has been running the club, and now he's officially taken it over. Of course, I tried to explain the club didn't operate that way, but you as probably one of the closest federal agencies to get to the Hells Angels. How did you guys perceive the structure of the Hells Angels?
Well, to go back just a little bit,
Okay.
I thought I was special, and I thought I had done special things. ATF made it a point to remind me how unspecial I was.
Okay. Well, see, that's interesting. That sounds like a military perspective for sure. You think you went above and beyond the line of duty, and your superior says, "No, what's happening here is you jeopardized a bunch of people."
Yeah, and I thought, like in the Hells Angels case, when we closed it up and my part of it was done, like I was like, where's my parade?
Wasn't that successful though? Was it? Do you think? In all honesty.
I'll say this: the prosecution of that case was not as successful as it should have been.
I mean, you've got Calvin in there in the casino floor shooting people on film.
That case, which is now 20 years old,
Right.
is every bit as prosecutable and winnable today, the RICO charges on that, as they were 20 years ago,
Well, what
based on
happened?
evidence, based on testimony, based on thousands of hours of criminal.
But Jay, what happened? Why didn't they? Why couldn't they succeed?
Because the government couldn't stay out of its own way. Our case ends, and as you know, and with the beauty of living in America, you get to confront
Yes, you
the
do.
people that are
How well I know. Yeah.
not only as individuals, but you get to see the evidence and
Right.
and review the evidence. So in that discovery phase, there was other Hells Angels investigations still active. So when Black Biscuit ends and the defense demands discovery, the government could not.
I knew that was a big problem.
The government couldn't agree on how to release discovery. And because they didn't want to compromise other ongoing cases, they decided we're going to withhold discovery, but in order to do so, we've got to dismiss charges and reduce charges. So from the outside looking in, as a defense attorney, you've got this undercover driven case, and now charges are being dropped and charges are being dismissed and reduced. It's logical to say this undercover driven case, the undercovers must be dirty. Like we weren't dirty.
Let me say something here. It's been 20 years, like you stated. Julian Scheer. Okay, Julian Scheer interviews me for Angels of Death. I think you're in that book as well. Sonny's in it. He comes to my house, interviews me. It's a little bit contentious. You know how Scheer is. And I'm not bad mouthing. That's just his style and his job. So he shows up in Ventura, and I say to him, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I just driving to Arizona. Just thought I'd stop off and have you sign my book." He had a book he wanted me to sign.
I've seen the picture of you two
Yeah.
holding his book.
Yeah. So we go through this whole thing, and then he says to me, I said, "So what the hell's going on?" I go, "You going from Canada to Arizona? Something's happening." And he said, he inferred, and like I said, it's been 20 years, so I don't feel like I'm compromising him. He said, "Something big's going to happen. Somebody's undercover." But they never announced who that was. So were they holding back on somebody? This is a question that's been in my mind. Was it you? I think you had already been compromised. Was it somebody else? Was it another member that was in place and they didn't want to give him up? Do you know what I'm talking about? Julian showed up in Arizona for the court hearing. That was a long drive from Canada.
So Black Biscuit ends, but there's also a Hells Angels ATF investigation being run out of Los Angeles. Mike Kramer is being driven.
Mesa Mike.
Mesa Mike, who has firsthand information of the Cynthia Garcia murder.
Right. Yeah.
And they've expanded that case beyond Cynthia Garcia.
Now, that's the beheading, right?
Yes.
And did, was there any complicity from Mesa Mike in that? Because I always thought there was some complicity from Mesa Mike in that crime. And it's a crime. I'm not going to pretend or sugarcoat it.
To the best of my knowledge, not only being complicit in that, was an active
participant. That's what I thought, because there was a statement in my archives.
The first rat in the door gets the best cheese.
Exactly. Okay. There was something, he wanted someone to use a knife. He presented him with that knife out there in that desert. And he said, her head will come off easy. There's something to do with the sharpness of the knife. And it was Mesa Mike that produced the knife, I think. I don't know. You correct me if I'm wrong, or enlighten me if I'm off.
To my knowledge, so Cynthia Garcia shows up. She's at this party.
She's at the clubhouse.
She says the wrong thing at the wrong time at the wrong place to the wrong people. Like, you don't insult the Hells Angels in their own house in front of multiple men. You just don't do that. Right?
No, you don't.
You don't do that. There's tragic consequences coming.
And there was tragic consequences.
So she's beat to near death. They roll her up in a piece of carpeting, put her in the trunk of a car, drive her out to the desert in Apache Junction, and try to cut her head off. But the knife they were using, wasn't a quality knife. They couldn't get through her spinal cord.
Right.
They basically cut her head off. So, in attempting to prove that case, Mesa Mike goes back to Kevin Augustiniak and Paul Eichheit and delivers them these brand new sharp obsidian knives to elicit conversation.
That's what that was about.
Their admission as to what happened.
It's because it's been 20 years since I've read these. Yeah. I have all the paperwork and all that stuff.
Hey, next time, this knife will cut through that spinal column.
Right. And then he ran off to South America.
Paul Eichheit did.
Yeah, they wanted the marshals came to me on a USA run, and they said, "We want Paul to come back. We know what he did. This is the best deal for him." They wanted me to petition him, and I told them, I said, "You want me to petition this guy to come back, and you guys are going to try him for murder?" I said, "I'm not going to do it."
So part of the Cynthia Garcia investigation of her murder, part of it was being driven out of California, where Mesa Mike moved to SFV, San Fernando, and was doing his thing. But I was there with boots on the ground with Augustiniak and Eichheit working another aspect to it. Black Biscuit ends, and that's when the Hells Angels are arrested. I believe Eichheit has an ankle monitor, and he cuts his ankle monitor off and jets to Argentina.
Right.
And is there for an extended period of time.
5 years? 6 years?
At least.
Yeah. It was a long time. I was in Coda, Wyoming, the USA run. I had set the whole thing up, was interacting with the police chief there, who turned out to be a really good guy, and we remain friends to this day. We still write each other. He's retired now. But he came to me and said, "The feds want to talk to you," and I said, "Man, I'm here, I'm on a run, man, I'm relaxing." He goes, "Well, they're really being persistent."
Which is a part of the explanation as to why Black Biscuit was less successful on the prosecution level than it should have been, is because the Los Angeles case was still active, and we didn't want to compromise Mesa Mike. So we're holding back and having to let charges go and reduce charges without forfeiting that investigation.
Okay,